The waitress who saw too much. A mafia boss's last warning came from the quietest girl in the room. She was pouring wine for the most dangerous man in the city when she saw it. A device the size of a dime, glued beneath his table, humming with someone else's ambition. One whisper could save his life. One whisper could end hers. Scarlet Veil had 6 seconds to decide whether to stay invisible forever or step into a war she was never meant to survive. If you want to know how a quiet waitress brought down a traitor inside the most feared empire on the East Coast, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain had been falling on Brenner's Point since a little after 4 in the afternoon, and by 9 o'clock it had settled into that patient, stubborn kind of rain that didn't plan on stopping. It came down slant against the diner windows, beating up on the old glass and sliding in crooked rivers toward the sill. The neon sign outside, the Blue Gull, coffee and supper, buzzed and flickered every 40 seconds or so, painting the wet sidewalk an unsteady pink. A gull somewhere down near the fish piers made a noise that sounded almost human, almost like a woman laughing too hard at a joke that wasn't funny. Inside the diner, it was warm in that old, tired way. Steam heat, fryer oil, coffee that had been on the burner too long. Scarlet Veil had been on her feet since 2. She could feel every hour of it in the small of her back, in the arches of her feet inside shoes that used to be white. She moved between tables the way she always did. Quiet, efficient, eyes down unless a customer wanted them up. Her dark hair was pulled back in a low knot, a few pieces loose at her temples where the heat had sweated them free. She was 26 years old. She had a small scar under her chin from falling off a bike when she was 11, and a chipped front tooth she never smiled wide enough to show. She wore a name tag that said Scarlet in smudged black marker because the plastic one had snapped 3 weeks ago and she hadn't gotten around to replacing it. Nobody who walked into the Blue Gull ever really looked at her. That was the part she had gotten used to. That was the part, if she was being honest with herself, that she had started to need. "Order up, Scar." Manny's voice came rough through the pass-through window, a thick arm shoving a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes into the light. "Table 6, and tell Walt his eggs are going to take another minute. The yolk's broke, and I ain't serving him broke yolks. Copy that." She picked up the plate with the edge of a folded towel and didn't wince at the heat through the cloth, even though it was hot enough to bite. "Scarlet." "Yeah, Manny." "You look like hell, kid. You eating?" "I ate." "When?" She didn't answer. She pushed through the swinging half door and carried the meatloaf to table 6, where an old man named Bert was waiting with his napkin tucked into his collar, the way men did in the 1970s, and apparently never stopped doing. "Here you go, Bert. Ketchup's already on the table." "Bless you, darling," Bert said, and patted her wrist with a hand that was mostly knuckle and liver spots. She moved on. There were 12 people in the diner at that hour. She counted them the way she always counted them, without thinking about it, the way other people breathed. Bert at 6. The 2 truckers at the counter who came through every 3rd Thursday, one of them named Dale, the other one she had never heard his name. A woman in a wet raincoat at the counter stool nearest the door, nursing a coffee, waiting out the rain, probably. 4 college kids in the back booth who were going to tip badly and leave a mess. A young couple by the window who weren't talking to each other and hadn't been for 20 minutes. And the 3 men at the corner table. The 3 men at the corner table were the reason she was counting. She had seen them walk in 45 minutes ago, and something in her chest had done a small, quick drop, like missing a stare in the dark. Not because they were loud. They were not loud. It was the opposite of loud. They walked in the way men walked when the room was supposed to rearrange itself around them, and they were right. The room did. Manny had come out from the back and said, "Good evening, Mr. Crane," in a voice Scarlet had never heard him use before. A voice that was not quite fear and not quite respect, but had salt from both. Then Manny had disappeared into the kitchen and had not come out again except to shove plates through the window. The man in the middle was Leonardo Crane. She knew the name because everybody in Brenner's Point knew the name. You could live your whole life in this city and never once see his face. But you knew the name, the way you knew the name of the mayor, or the archdiocese, or the harbor. The Crane family had been running the waterfront in Brenner's Point since her grandfather was a boy. They owned the docks, or the men who owned the docks, which came to the same thing. They owned a piece of City Hall and most of the Longshoremen's Union, and, people said, two of the three judges on the criminal bench. The papers called him alleged this and reputed that. The papers had been calling him that for 18 years, and no charge had ever stuck. He was in his late 40s. He was not a large man. That was the first thing that surprised her. You heard the name Leonardo Crane, and you expected somebody huge, somebody who blocked out the light. He was maybe 5'10", maybe 170 pounds, lean the way a long-distance runner is lean. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, the collar of his white shirt open one button. His hair was dark and going gray at the temples in a way that looked deliberate, like he had asked it to. His eyes were the color of wet slate. The two men with him were bigger. The one on his left had a flat, broken-looking nose and a neck thick as a forearm. The one on his right was younger, maybe 30, handsome in a way that made Scarlett think of the kind of handsome that got used as a weapon. Both of them had their jackets buttoned in a way that meant they were carrying. Scarlett knew what that meant. Her father had been a cop for 29 years before the cancer had taken him, and she had grown up understanding what a button jacket on a warm night meant. She had taken their orders without making eye contact. Crane had ordered the veal. The broken-nosed man had ordered a steak, medium. The handsome one had ordered a Caesar salad and water, no ice, which Scarlett had written down and then stared at for a second because men like that didn't order Caesar salads. They ordered red meat and cheap bourbon. And when one of them ordered a salad, it was because he was worried about his heart. And a man worried about his heart was a man who planned to live a long time, which was a strange thing to be planning when you were having dinner with Leonardo Crane. She had brought them a bottle of the house red because Crane had nodded at the wine list without reading it, which was a man's way of saying you pick. She poured 3 glasses and stepped back and went to check on Bert. That was 40 minutes ago. Now it was 9:17 in the evening, and the rain was doing what the rain did, and Scarlett was standing behind the counter, refilling the sugar caddies because that was a thing you could do that looked busy, and she was watching the corner table out of the side of her eye the way she had been watching it for 40 minutes, and that was when she saw it. She had bent down to grab a fresh stack of napkins from the shelf under the register. From that angle, looking across the diner at knee height, her line of sight went right under the corner table where the 3 men sat. And there, glued to the underside of the table, not stuck on cheap, not taped on sloppy, but glued flat and square into the grain of the wood where it would have been invisible from above, was a small dark disc no bigger than a dime, a tiny pinhole in the center of it, a hair-thin wire trailing off the back of it and disappearing into the seam of the table's pedestal. Scarlett stayed crouched behind the counter for a full 3 seconds with her hand on the napkins. She knew what she was looking at. She knew the way you know a knife is a knife. Her father had kept a box of old job souvenirs in the garage, things he had worked cases on, and when she was 14 he had shown her a bug he had pulled out of a motel room in a vice case. This is what they use now, Scar. Used to be the size of a matchbook. Now look at it. This one was stuck to the bottom of a lamp. She remembered the weight of it in her palm. She remembered him saying, "Anybody tells you a small thing can't hurt you, Scar, you tell him you got a daddy who knows better." The disc under the corner table was smaller than the one her father had shown her, and newer and more expensive looking. The pinhole in the center meant it was a microphone, not a camera. Somebody had been in this diner, today or yesterday or last week, and had laid down on their back under that table and glued a listening device to the wood of a booth they knew. They had to have known you didn't plant a bug on spec, that Leonardo Crane was going to sit at. Her hand was shaking a little, so she took the napkins and stood up slowly and set them on the counter. Her mouth was dry. She thought, walk out the back. Punch your time card, tell Manny you're sick. Walk out the back door and go home and lock the door and don't ever come back here again. That was the smart thing. That was the only smart thing. Whatever was happening at that corner table was not her business. Whoever had put that bug under that table was either a cop, which meant federal charges for anybody who warned Crane, or was somebody worse than a cop, which meant a funeral for anybody who warned Crane. Either way, a waitress in a $10 shirt had no good reason to open her mouth. She thought about her mother, 300 miles west in a memory care unit in Pennsylvania, who sometimes still knew her name. She thought about the $2,300 a month that place cost. She thought about the overdue notice on the kitchen counter of her apartment and the fact that Manny paid her in cash on Fridays, and she had already borrowed against this week. Walk out the back, Scar. Punch the card. Go home. She picked up the wine bottle instead. She didn't decide to. Her hand just did it. She picked up the bottle of the house red off the back counter, and she tucked a clean white towel over the top of her wrist the way a proper server did, and she walked out from behind the counter and across the diner toward the corner table. The handsome one saw her first. His eyes came up and tracked her from about 15 feet out, cool and uncurious, the way a cat watches a leaf. The broken-nosed one didn't look at her at all, because his job was to watch the door, and he was watching the door. Crane was mid-sentence, something low, his fingers loose around the stem of his wine glass. "Not tonight, and not tomorrow," Crane was saying. "I told Falcone I'd give him an answer by Friday, and Friday's what he gets, not a day before. If he calls again—" "Would anyone care for more wine?" Scarlett said. Her voice came out steady. That surprised her. Inside her chest, her heart was doing something fast and sick, but her voice came out the way it always came out. Quiet, polite. The voice of a girl who was not really there. Crane didn't look up. He just lifted his glass an inch in the universal gesture that meant, "Yes, please." The handsome one shook his head once. The broken-nosed one grunted, which Scarlett took as a yes. She moved to Crane's side first. She had decided, in the 6 steps from the counter, that she would do it on the pour. She would do it on the pour because on the pour she had a legitimate reason to lean in close, and because on the pour the 2 bodyguards would be watching her hands, not her mouth. She tilted the bottle. The wine came out dark into the glass, purple-black, in the bad light. She leaned in. She was close enough to smell him. He smelled like cedar, and something warmer under it, something like wet leather. A clean smell. An expensive smell. Her face was maybe 8 inches from his ear. "There's a bug under your table," she said. She set it into the curve of his ear under her breath, the words barely shaped. "Microphone, glued to the wood, don't look." The wine kept pouring. Her hand did not shake. That was the thing she would remember later, the thing that would make her wake up at 3 in the morning for weeks afterward. That her hand did not shake. Leonardo Crane did not move. For 1 full second he did not move at all, and Scarlett thought, "He didn't hear me. Oh, thank you. He didn't hear me. I can walk away. I can—" And then, without turning his head, without lifting his eyes from the tablecloth, Crane said, at a volume that would not have reached the next table if the next table had been a foot closer, "Are you certain?" "Yes." "When?" "Just now. I saw it just now, bending down at the counter." "Describe it." "Small, dime size, dark, pinhole in the center, wire running into the pedestal seam." "How do you know what you're looking at?" "My father was a cop." She set the bottle down on the table. Her hand was steady. A very small muscle moved in Leonardo Crane's jaw. Nothing else. His eyes stayed on his glass. Then he said, still at that same impossible volume, "Thank you. Pour for my associates, please, and then walk away. Do not look at this table again tonight." "Yes, sir." She poured for the broken-nosed man. She poured for the handsome one, who had been watching her the whole time with an expression she could not read, but that made the skin on the back of her arms prickle. She said, "Can I get anyone anything else?" In her ordinary voice, and Crane said, "No, thank you, miss. We're fine," in his ordinary voice. And she turned and walked back toward the counter. And her legs were working, and her face was working, and she put the wine bottle back on the shelf and picked up the napkin stack and started folding. Her hands started shaking then. She could not stop them. She jammed them in her apron pocket and held them there through the cloth. At the corner table, Leonardo Crane did not appear to react in any way for the next 11 minutes. He finished his wine. He ate 3 more bites of his veal. He listened to something the handsome one was saying about a cousin in Philadelphia. He laughed once, quietly, at something the handsome one said. Then he set down his fork and said, in the same easy voice, "Marco, step outside a minute. Tell Louis to bring the car up." The handsome one, Marco, nodded and stood and walked out into the rain. The bell over the door jingled. The door swung shut. Marco was gone. Crane did not look at the broken-nosed man. He said, "Dom." "Yeah, boss." "When Marco comes back in, I want you to tell him we're going to the house instead of the club. Tell him I changed my mind about the club. Then when we get to the house, I want you to bring that girl with us. The waitress." Quietly. "Don't scare her. Don't hurt her. If she doesn't want to come, tell her I'd consider it a personal favor. Tell her I'll have her home by midnight." Dom, the broken-nosed man, did not ask why. He said, "Yeah, boss." And Dom, Yeah. Check the table? Dom dropped his napkin on the floor. He bent to get it. He was down there for maybe 4 seconds. He came up with the napkin in his hand, and his face had gone a color that was not quite its color anymore, a shade paler at the jaw. Yeah, Dom said quietly. It's there, boss. I know it's there. How did... The waitress. Dom's eyes went across the diner to the counter where Scarlett was folding napkins and looking at nothing. His expression did not change, but something in the weight of his attention did. Huh, Dom said. Yes. She a plant? If she was a plant, Crane said mildly, she wouldn't have told us. Yeah, okay, yeah, that tracks. Don't scare her, Dom. I won't scare her, boss. Marco came back in with rain on the shoulders of his jacket, and Dom told Marco that they were going to the house and not the club, and Marco's face did a small thing that Crane noticed and filed away without comment. Then the three of them stood and put on their coats, and Crane left $200 on the table for a $92 check, which was what he always did, and they walked toward the door. Crane stopped at the counter on the way out. Scarlett looked up. She had known he would stop. She had not known it with her mind, but she had known it with her stomach. Dinner was excellent, Crane said, at a perfectly ordinary volume, the polite voice of a polite man talking to a waitress. Thank you. You're welcome, sir. My associate Dom would like a word with you outside when you have a moment. A small matter. It won't take long. Sir, it would be a favor to me. I don't ask for many. His slate-colored eyes were on hers now for the first time all night, and there was nothing threatening in them. Nothing at all. There was only a quiet and exact attention, like being looked at by a man who was deciding whether to trust her with something important and was trying to be fair about it. I get off at 10, Scarlett heard herself say. 10 will be fine. He inclined his head, just the smallest bow. Miss, I'm sorry. I didn't catch your name. Scarlett. Scarlett? He said it once, thoughtfully, as if he were putting it somewhere careful. Thank you, Scarlett. Until 10. He left. The bell over the door jingled. The rain ate them. Scarlett stood at the counter with her hands flat on the wood and breathed through her nose for a long time. Manny came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked at the corner table, at the $200 lying on it, at the door, at her. Scar. Yeah, Manny. What was that? He said the veal was good. Manny looked at her for a long second. He was 61 years old and had been running the Blue Gull since before she was born, and had, she was suddenly certain, known exactly who Leonardo Crane was the minute the man walked in, and had known it in a way that meant he had also known, for a long time, certain other things about this city that Scarlett had not known. Scarlett, Manny said, quieter. I'm fine, Manny. If you're not fine, I'm fine. He looked at her a moment more. Then he nodded slowly, and he went back into the kitchen, and she heard the back door open and close, which was him stepping out for a cigarette, which was him giving her a minute alone. She stood at the counter. She thought about her father. Her father had been a good cop, a good man, the kind of cop who came home and washed the day off his hands before he touched his wife. He had died when Scarlett was 19, and at the funeral a great many men in suits had come and shaken her hand and told her what a good man her father had been, and exactly one of those men had leaned close and said low, Your daddy was the only straight one left on his shift, kid. You remember that. The only one. She had been 19 and grieving, and she had not asked the man what he meant, and she had spent 7 years sometimes wondering. She thought, I could have walked out the back. She thought, I didn't walk out the back. At 9:58, she put on her jacket. She told Manny she was heading out. Manny said, You want me to walk you to your car, Scar? And she said, No, thank you, Manny. And he looked at her and said, Okay, kid, in a voice that meant he understood that whatever was happening was not the kind of thing a diner cook with a bad knee could walk her out of. She pushed open the door. The bell jingled. The rain hit her face. A long black car was idling at the curb with its headlights off. The back passenger window slid down 2 inches. A voice she recognized as Dom's said, Miss, Mr. Crane would like to speak with you. It's 3 miles. He'll have you home by midnight, like he said. Scarlett stood on the wet sidewalk with her hand on the door of the Blue Gull. She could still go back inside. She could still go back inside and lock herself in the employee's bathroom and call the police. And the police would come and everything would be a different kind of story from this moment forward. A story with her name in a file somewhere and a detective asking her questions, and possibly her picture in a newspaper. And she would be known in this city in a way she had spent her whole adult life trying very hard not to be known. Or she could get in the car. She thought about her father again. She thought about the thing the man at the funeral had said. The only straight one left on his shift, kid. She let go of the diner door. She walked across the wet sidewalk, and Dom got out of the front passenger seat and opened the back door for her like a chauffeur, and she slid into the leather-smelling dark of the back seat. Leonardo Crane was sitting on the far side. He had taken off his suit jacket and folded it across his lap. In the low green light from the dashboard, his face looked tired in a way it had not looked in the diner. "Miss Vale," he said, "you found out my last name." "I did. That was fast. I'm careful." Dom closed her door. The locks clunked. The car pulled away from the curb, and the neon blue Gull slid past the rain-streaked window and was gone. Leonardo Crane did not speak for a long moment. He was looking out his own window at the harbor going by, the black water, the shapes of the freighters riding at their moorings. "I'm going to ask you a question, Miss Vale," he said finally. "And then I'm going to ask you some more questions. The first question is the important one. The first question is, why did you tell me about that device? Because I've been sitting here thinking about it, and I cannot come up with a good reason. A reasonable person does not warn a man like me about a thing like that. A reasonable person walks away. So I would like you to tell me, please, in your own words, why you did not walk away." The car went over a seam in the road. The tires hissed on the wet pavement. Scarlett looked at her own hands in her lap. They were not shaking anymore. That was interesting. She had expected them to be shaking. "I don't know," she said. "Try." She was quiet for a moment. "My father was a police officer," she said. "He worked in this city for 29 years. He was a good one, I think. I think maybe one of the only good ones on his shift. I don't know everything he knew. I was 19 when he died, and there was a lot he never told me. But I think whoever put that thing under your table, they put it there to hurt you. And I don't know you. I don't know if you deserve to be hurt or not. A lot of people would probably say you do. But the person who put that there," she stopped. She tried again. "The person who put that there didn't do it because they're a good person. They did it because they're a sneak. And my father hated sneaks more than he hated anything. And I watched him hate them for 19 years. And when I saw that little thing under your table, I thought about him. And I thought, if I walk away from this, I am on the side of the sneak. And I didn't want to be on the side of the sneak." Leonardo Crane was looking at her now. She could feel it even though she was still looking at her own hands. "That is a very unusual answer, Miss Vale. It's the one I've got. Do you know who I am?" "Yes." "Say it." "You're Leonardo Crane. And do you know what that means in this city?" "I have an idea." "Tell me your idea." She lifted her head and looked at him. His slate eyes were waiting for her in the low green dashboard light, patient, uncruel. "It means," Scarlett said, "that a lot of people in this city are afraid of you. It means you probably deserve some of that. It means my father, if he were still alive, would probably not shake your hand. But it also means that right now, tonight, somebody who is worse than you is trying to take you down, and they're not doing it in the open, and they're not doing it clean. And my father would have hated that worse than he hated you, so here I am." The car was quiet for a long time. "Miss Vale," Leonardo Crane said at last, "I would like to offer you a job. I have a job. A different kind of job. You can keep the one you have. In fact, I would prefer that you keep the one you have. The job I am offering is one where you continue to do, in other places, what you did tonight. You watch. You notice. You tell me what you see. Nobody would know. Nobody at all would know except me and Dom. You would be paid well, very well." "Why me?" "Because tonight you saw something that 3 men who are paid very well to see such things did not see. Because you do not look like a person who sees things, which is the single most valuable quality a person who sees things can have. And because—" He paused, and something that was almost a smile moved at the corner of his mouth and then was gone. "Because you are, apparently, Miss Vale, a person who does not walk away from sneaks. And I happen to have a sneak problem." Scarlett looked out the window. The harbor slid past. The rain was slowing now, pulling back to a mist. Somewhere out on the black water a foghorn sounded, low and long, and she thought of her father, who had liked foghorns, who had once told her that a foghorn was the saddest man-made sound there was. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I ask." And Mr. Crane, "Yes. If I say yes, and I'm not saying yes, but if I do, I need you to understand something. Tell me. I'm not yours. I'm not anybody's. I'm not going to carry a gun. I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm not going to lie for you in a courtroom. If I see something that makes me want to walk, I walk. If I find out you're the kind of man my father would have put in a cell, I walk. Those are the rules." Leonardo Crane was silent for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "Miss Vale, if those were not the rules, I would not want you." The car turned off the harbor road. The lights of Brenner's Point spread out below them, pink and yellow and smeared by rain, a city that had not noticed yet that one small thing had changed inside it tonight. A waitress in a $10 shirt had looked under a table and had not walked away, and somewhere in that city a person who did not yet know they had lost, had lost. Scarlet Vale sat in the back of the long black car with her hands folded neatly in her lap, and watched the lights of her city go by, and tried to decide what kind of woman she was going to be from here on out. The car delivered her home at 11:46, which was 14 minutes ahead of the promise Leonardo Crane had made, and Scarlet Vale took this to mean something about the man, though she was not yet sure what. Dom walked her to the door of her building, the broken-nosed man turning out to be unexpectedly polite in that specific old neighborhood way, holding the vestibule door for her with one big hand and waiting until she had her key in the lock before he said anything. "Miss." "Yeah, you got my number. Boss gave it to you on the card." "He did." "You call that number day or night, I answer. You don't call anybody else about this. Not a friend, not a sister, not a priest. Nobody." "I don't have a sister." Dom's mouth moved in something that might have been amusement in a younger man. "Good," he said. "Less people to explain it to." He waited until she was inside and had the inner door closed before he turned and walked back to the car. She watched him through the narrow wire glass window in the foyer. He did not look back. The taillights of the long black sedan pulled away and merged into the thin late traffic on Sibley Avenue and were gone. Scarlett climbed the 3 flights up to her apartment slowly, one hand on the banister. The stairwell smelled like fried onions from 2B and wet carpet from the leak at the landing the super had been promising to fix since September. At her own door she stopped, keys in her hand, and listened to the building. Somewhere above her, a television was playing a laugh track. Somewhere below her, a man was yelling at a woman in Portuguese, or she thought it was Portuguese. Ordinary sounds. The building was the building. Nobody was waiting for her in the hall. She let herself in and put the chain on the door and stood in the dark of her own kitchen for a long moment without turning on the light. Then she went to the kitchen sink and threw up. It came up quick and thin, mostly coffee and bile, and she gripped the edge of the sink with both hands and let it happen, and afterward she ran the water and rinsed her mouth and her face and stood there dripping with the tap still going. "Okay," she said to nobody. "Okay, okay, okay." She did not sleep that night. She lay on her back on top of the covers in her work clothes with the bedside lamp on and stared at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like the state of Michigan. And she thought about her father, and she thought about the $2,300 a month in Pennsylvania, and she thought about the slate-colored eyes of the man in the back of the car saying, "If those were not the rules, I would not want you." And somewhere around 4 in the morning, she made her decision, and somewhere around 5:30, she finally slept. She woke at 9. Her phone had a text from a number she did not have saved. It said only, "When you're ready, call. LK." She read it twice. She put the phone face down on the nightstand. She got up and made coffee and drank 2 cups standing at the counter in her bare feet, and on the 3rd cup she picked the phone back up and made the call. He answered on the 2nd ring. He did not say hello. "Miss Vale?" "The answer is yes." There was a small pause on the other end, not of surprise, but of somebody taking a moment to set something down. "Thank you," he said. "I have conditions." "I remember the conditions. No weapon, no perjury. You walk when you want." "Those are the big ones. I have a small one." "Tell me." "My mother is in a memory care facility in Pennsylvania. It costs $2,300 a month. I'm 3 months behind. If something happens to me, if I get hit by a bus, if I walk in front of the wrong person, any of it, I need to know she doesn't get put out. Send me the address of the facility this afternoon." I'm not asking you to Miss Vale, send me the address. That is the end of that conversation. Is there anything else? She swallowed. No. Good. Work tonight is normal. Dom will come by the diner at the end of your shift. He will not come inside. He will be in a different car. You will not acknowledge him. You will simply get in the car when you finish your shift. Is that acceptable? Yes. Miss Vale? Yes. Thank you. He hung up. She set the phone down and looked at her kitchen in the morning light. The overdue notice was still on the counter, where it had been the night before. It looked, in the clean daylight, exactly as pathetic as it had looked in the dark. She picked it up and folded it in half and put it in the drawer with the rubber bands. Then she went to work. The Blue Gull, in daylight, was an uglier place than it was at night. The neon didn't help it anymore. You could see the water stains on the ceiling tiles and the spot on the booth where somebody had burned the vinyl with a cigarette in 1994 and the stain on the carpet by the register where a pipe had leaked 2 winters ago. Scarlett tied on her apron and took her first table at 11, and she did the lunch rush without incident, and when Manny passed her in the kitchen, he did not look at her, which was its own kind of looking. At 2 o'clock during the slow hour, he finally spoke. Scar. Yeah. You gonna tell me? Tell you what, Manny. He was at the flat top, his back to her, scraping down the grill with a pumice brick. He did not turn around. I've been here 37 years, he said. I know what a man like that looks like walking into my diner. I know what he looks like walking out. He walked out last night different than he walked in. And you walked out different too. And I'm standing here this morning trying to figure out if I got to start looking for a new waitress. You don't. That a promise, Scar. That's me telling you the truth. He was quiet a long time, scraping. The grill hissed under the pumice. Your daddy, Manny said finally. He ever tell you how he and me know each other? He said you used to fix his car. Yeah, I used to fix his car. Mam, tapatistats. He laughed, short, without turning around. Yeah, I fixed his car. Kid, your daddy used to sit at that counter right there every Wednesday for 11 years and drink coffee and listen. That was his Wednesday. He'd come in after his shift and he'd sit at the counter and he'd drink coffee and he'd listen to what men said when they thought a cop couldn't hear him because he was in a dirty jacket with grease on his hands pretending to read the paper. That was your daddy. Scarlett leaned against the pass-through. She had not known this. She had not known this at all. He was on Crane, she said quietly. Wasn't he? My father was on Crane. Your father was on a lot of people. Crane was one. Crane's old man was another. Your daddy didn't get much. The ones who talked where he could hear him weren't the ones who knew anything worth knowing. But he tried, Scar. He tried for a long time. Why are you telling me this now? Manny turned around then. He had flour on his forearm and a smudge of something on the side of his nose, and he looked at her with the tired eyes of an old man who had watched too many people he cared about walk into too many rooms. Because, he said, last night I watched Leonardo Crane leave $200 on a $92 check and stop at my counter on his way out to be polite to my waitress. And I thought about your daddy, and I thought, shit. I thought whatever your daddy spent 11 Wednesdays trying to do, his kid maybe just did it by accident in one night. And I didn't know whether to be proud of you or drive you to the bus station. Which one did you land on? I'm still working it out. She looked at him for a long moment. She wanted very badly to tell him everything. She wanted to tell him about the device under the table and the green light on the dashboard and the slate eyes and the deal. But she thought about Dom in the vestibule, saying, not a friend, not a sister, not a priest. And she thought about the fact that Manny was 61 years old and had a bad knee and a wife in Astoria. And she thought, he has been kind to you your whole adult life. Do not make him carry this. Manny? Yeah, Scar. I'm going to be fine. That a promise. That's me telling you the truth. He looked at her a second more. Then he nodded, one slow old man nod, and he turned back to his grill, and he said over his shoulder, Table 9 needs refills, kid. Get moving. She got moving. Dom came for her at 10:03 in a dark gray four-door that was not the car from the night before. She saw it across the street as she stepped out into the October cold, and she did not look at it. She walked half a block down Sibley to the corner because that was what made sense. If she had been a woman walking to her own car, the corner was where her car would have been. And the gray four-door pulled up beside her, and the back door opened, and she got in. Leonardo Crane was not in the car. Only Dom, driving, alone. Evening, miss. Evening, Dom. Boss is at the house. He's expecting you. About a 20-minute ride. You good? I'm good. He pulled away from the curb. They took the harbor road north, past the fish piers and the long shuttered cannery and the place where the old amusement park had been when she was a kid, which was a parking lot now. And then the road climbed up into the bluffs where the houses were large and set back from the road behind walls of stone and ivy. Dom turned in at a gate she would not have seen if she had not been looking for it. The gate opened on its own, which meant there was a camera. The driveway was longer than her apartment was wide. The house at the end of the driveway was not the house she had expected. It was not marble-columned or floodlit or any of the things movies had taught her a man like Leonardo Crane would live in. It was a long, low stone house of the kind rich men had built on the North Shore in the 1920s, and it looked tired and loved in the way a well-kept old horse looked tired and loved. There were actual hydrangeas dying politely in pots by the front steps. There was a gray cat sitting on the railing of the porch. Dom parked. He did not get out. Front door, miss. Just knock. He's waiting. You're not coming in. I am not. Okay. She got out of the car. The air up here on the bluffs was different from the air down by the water. Cleaner, thinner, full of the smell of pine and wood smoke from somebody's chimney. She walked up the 3 stone steps. The gray cat watched her without interest. She knocked. The door opened almost at once. Leonardo Crane was not wearing a suit. He was wearing a dark cardigan over a white shirt with the sleeves pushed up and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and house slippers. He looked, for a disorienting second, like somebody's uncle. Miss Vale, come in, please. She came in. The house smelled like old wood and coffee and, very faintly, like a fireplace. The foyer had a tile floor worn smooth in a path from the front door to the back of the house, the way floors got when the same feet walked the same line for 100 years. He took her coat and hung it on a peg. A dog somewhere deeper in the house thumped a tail against a floor and did not get up. That's Maggie, he said, without turning. She's 14. She stopped caring about visitors around year 8. This way, please. He led her down a hallway lined with framed photographs that she tried not to look at too obviously and mostly failed. Black and white. A woman in a sundress holding a baby. A younger Leonardo in a graduation gown. 2 men in suits, arms around each other, at what looked like a wedding. An old woman with a cane, laughing. None of them the photographs of a monster. All of them the photographs of anybody's family. He took her into a study at the back of the house. It was a small room, smaller than she had expected, with a fire burning low in a stone hearth, and a wall of books, and a desk with 2 laptops and a leather chair pulled up to the desk. And across from the desk, 2 armchairs facing each other with a small table between them. There were papers spread out on the desk. There was a glass of water on the table between the armchairs, and a second glass empty. Sit, please. Water. Thank you. She sat. He poured from a pitcher on the side table and handed her a glass and sat down across from her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The fire popped. The old dog breathed somewhere out in the hall. Before we begin, Leonardo Crane said, I want to say 2 things. Okay. The first is that I called your mother's facility this morning. The balance is paid in full through the end of the calendar year. I have set up automatic monthly payments from a holding account that is not in my name and cannot be traced to me. If I disappear tomorrow, if I am arrested, if I am killed, those payments will continue. I have arranged this. It is done. You do not owe me for it. It is not leverage. I'm telling you this because you should know, going in, that this piece of your life is safe regardless of what you decide to do tonight or any night after this. Is that clear? Her throat did an unexpected thing. She took a sip of water. That's clear. The second thing, I want to tell you what I am. I am not going to tell you everything. That would be foolish of both of us. But I want you to know enough to make an honest decision. Because you said to me last night that if you found out I was the kind of man your father would have put in a cell, you would walk. And I want you to walk now, tonight, if that is what you are going to do. Not in 6 months, after you have seen things and heard names. Now. Okay? He set his glass down. He looked into the fire. I move things into and out of this city that the city has decided it does not want to officially know about. Cigarettes, sometimes. Liquor, in certain volumes. Prescription pharmaceuticals that are legal in Canada and not legal here. I do not move heroin. I do not move fentanyl. I do not move women. I do not move children. I have had men killed 3 times in 22 years. Each of those men had killed someone of mine first, and each of those men I killed personally. And I will not apologize for any of the 3 of them, but I will not pretend to you that I am a clean man either. I am not a clean man, Miss Vale. I am a man who has tried to run a dirty business as cleanly as a dirty business can be run. I don't know if that is a distinction that means anything to you. I don't know if it would have meant anything to your father. I suspect it would not have. Your father sounds like he was a better man than I am. He looked up from his fire. That's what I am. If you want your coat, Dom is outside and he will drive you home and you will never hear from me again. And the payments to your mother's facility will continue regardless. That is the offer. Scarlett sat with her water glass in both hands. She looked at him in the firelight. He did not look like a monster. He did not look, in this moment, like a man who had killed 3 men. He looked like a tired man in a cardigan who had told her the truth because he had decided, for reasons of his own, that the truth was the only thing that was going to work here. She thought about her father. Her father had worked on Leonardo Crane. Manny had told her that. Her father had sat at that counter on Wednesday nights for 11 years and listened, and he had never caught him. And now here she was, in Leonardo Crane's study, with the man offering her a cardigan-soft version of himself and a glass of water and the truth. And the question was not whether her father would have shaken his hand. The question was whether her father, in his whole 29 years of being a cop, had ever once had a man in front of him who told him the truth the way this man had just told it to her. She thought the answer was probably no. The people selling fentanyl in this city, she said. The ones you don't deal with. What about them? You know who they are. I know who most of them are. Would you tell me? Leonardo Crane's eyebrows did a small, slow thing. Not surprise. Something more careful than surprise. Why? Because if I'm going to work for you, then at some point down the road when this is over, I would like to know that I was working for the man who gave up the names of the people selling fentanyl in this city. I don't need you to do it tomorrow. I don't need you to do it in a way that gets you killed, but somewhere along the way, before we're done. He looked at her for what felt like a long time. Miss Vale. Yes. You are going to be a problem for somebody someday. I've been told that. By whom? A teacher, 7th grade, Mrs. Kilbride. She meant it as a compliment, and then she tried to take it back. The corner of his mouth moved. It was the closest she had seen him come to a smile. All right, he said. I will think about your question. I will not answer it tonight, but I will think about it. Is that acceptable? That's acceptable. Then let us begin. He reached to the desk and pulled a folder across and opened it on the small table between them. Inside were photographs. 8x10s, the kind printed at home from a good printer, not glossy but sharp. He laid them out one by one. 6 faces, 5 men, 1 woman. All of them shot in the kind of candid way that meant somebody had been following them with a long lens. These are the 6 people, he said, who could have planted that device in that diner or paid someone to plant it. That is the whole list. I have thought about this all day. It is not a longer list. I have a larger organization than 6 people, but 6 are the only ones with both the information required to know I was going to be sitting at that specific table last night and the access required to arrange for the device. My reservation at that diner was made 48 hours in advance. Only 6 people knew about it. One of those 6 is the one we are looking for. I want you to look at these faces. Do not look at them as a police officer would look. Do not try to decide which one looks guilty. They all look guilty if you look long enough. Instead, I want you to memorize them. And then I am going to put you, in the next 2 weeks, in rooms where these people will be. And you will watch them. And you will tell me what you see. All shakes. She leaned forward. She looked. The first face was a man in his late 50s, heavy, jowly, gray hair combed back from a wide forehead. His name was Salvatore Ruggiero, Crane said, but everybody called him Sal. He had been with Crane's father before he had been with Crane. He was the bookkeeper. He knew every number. He was the single most trusted person in the organization and had been for 26 years. And Crane had included him on the list because, Crane said quietly, if I don't include him on the list, then I am not being honest with myself about what this list is. The second face was the handsome young man from the diner. Marco. Marco Venturi. 29 years old, Crane's sister's son. His nephew. He had come into the business 3 years ago after finishing law school and not taking the bar. He was clever, Crane said. He was maybe the cleverest person in the room at any given time, which was either a very good thing or a very bad thing, depending. The third face was a woman in her 40s, short black hair, sharp cheekbones, a mole above her lip. Her name was Regina Halliday. She was not family and not blood, but she had run Crane's 3 legitimate businesses, a construction supply company, a laundromat chain, and a catering hall, for 11 years. She had grown up in Queens. She was the most competent human being Crane had ever employed, he said, and he had never once caught her in a lie, which was either because she had never lied or because she was better at it than anyone else he had ever met. The fourth face was another older man, 60-something, wiry, a mustache, tired eyes. His name was Paulie Deems. He had come out of a long federal sentence 3 years ago and had come back to the organization and had been given a small territory and had behaved himself. And he had not forgotten and would never forget that those years had cost him his marriage, his son's childhood, and most of his back teeth. The fifth face was a man in his mid-30s with a shaved head and a neck tattoo that rose above his collar. Danny Brescia. He had been a problem solver in the organization for 8 years. He had put down 2 of the 3 men Crane had mentioned having killed. He was loyal in the way attack dogs were loyal, which was both the virtue and the limit of him. The sixth face she did not expect. That's a priest, Scarlett said. He is. A real priest. Yes. What is a priest doing on this list? Leonardo Crane looked at the photograph of the man in the black shirt and the white collar. He was perhaps 50, with thinning hair and the kind of face that had been handsome 20 years ago and was now simply kind. Father Joseph Aldosoro, Crane said, has been my friend for 31 years. We were in the same parish school together. He married my sister. He buried my father. He is a good priest and an honest man, and he is the only person outside my immediate operational circle to whom I had mentioned that dinner. I mentioned it to him on Tuesday. I told him I was going to the Blue Gull on Thursday to meet with 2 men because I wanted a quiet place where a man like me could not usually be found. He did not ask me who the 2 men were. He never does. He said he was happy the meeting was somewhere I could relax. I am putting him on this list because if I do not put him on this list, I am lying to myself. That is all. I do not believe it is him, but belief is not the same as knowing. Belief is how you get caught. Scarlett looked at the 6 faces on the table. Mr. Crane? Yes. One of these 6 is trying to put you in prison for the rest of your life. Yes. And you're going to keep doing business with all 6 of them until we know which one. Yes. Because if you change your pattern, they'll know you know. Yes. And you need them to keep thinking you don't know. Yes. That's going to be hard on you. He looked at her. The fire popped behind him. Maggie the old dog sighed in the hallway like an old woman settling. Miss Vale, he said, it is going to be hard on all of us. They worked for another hour and a half. He told her about each of the 6, their homes, their habits, their tells. Sal chewed the inside of his cheek when he was thinking about a number he did not like. Marco had a thing he did with his left cuff when he was about to say something he had rehearsed. Regina never sat with her back to a door. Paulie was afraid of dogs, which was a strange thing about a man like Paulie. Danny blinked too much when he was lying, which was a gift because it meant you always knew. Father Aldosoro had a habit of folding and refolding his napkin when he was uncomfortable with the direction of a conversation. These were the things Crane had cataloged over years, without meaning to, because he was a man who cataloged things. At the end of the hour and a half, he said, There is an event on Saturday night, a charity auction. My sister's foundation. It's held at the Belmar Hotel downtown. All 6 of them will be there, all of them in the same room at the same time for 3 hours. It will be the first place I put you. You will be a waitress. Because no one looks at waitresses. Because no one looks at waitresses. I noticed that. I know you did. He stood. She stood. He walked her back down the long hallway past the photographs of his life, and at the door he helped her on with her coat himself, which was the kind of old-world gesture her father used to do with her mother. "Miss Vale?" "Yes." "Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for the question." "Which question?" "About the fentanyl." "Oh. I have been asked many things in my life by many kinds of people. I have not been asked that before. I will think about it." He opened the door. The October cold came in. Dom was out in the driveway leaning against the gray car, smoking. He straightened when he saw her. At the top of the stone steps, she turned back. "Mr. Crane." "Yes." "The one who planted the device, when we find them." "Yes." "You said last night in the car that you have had 3 men killed. Is this going to be a 4th? Leonardo Crane stood in the doorway of his tired, beautiful house, with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and his dog breathing behind him, and the photographs of his dead watching him from the wall of the hallway, and he looked at her with those slate-colored eyes, and he was quiet for a long moment. "Miss Vale," he said finally, "that is the other question no one has ever asked me. I'd like an answer. I know you would. Will I get one?" "Not tonight." He closed the door gently. She walked down the 3 stone steps to the car where Dom was waiting, and the gray cat on the porch railing watched her go without interest. And behind her in the house, a man she did not understand stood in his hallway, looking at a wall of photographs and deciding, slowly, what kind of man he was going to have to be from here on out. The 3 days between that night in the study and the Saturday charity auction passed for Scarlett in a strange double exposure. On the outside, she was a waitress working the Friday dinner shift and the Saturday lunch shift, refilling ketchup bottles and wiping down boots and telling Bert at table 6 that yes, the meatloaf was good tonight, same as last night. On the inside, she was memorizing 6 faces. She had the photographs in a manila envelope Dom had handed her in the car on the way home, and she had spent hours at her kitchen table looking at them the way a student looks at flashcards, until Sal's cheek-chewing and Marco's cuff-fiddling and Regina's never sitting with her back to the door and Polly's nervousness around dogs and Danny's too-fast blinking and Father Aldesoro's napkin folding were all in her head like a little catalog she could open and close at will. On Friday night, Dom dropped off a garment bag at the diner. He did not come inside. He handed it through the back door to Manny, who brought it out to her without a word and stood there while she unzipped it. Inside was a black skirt, a white blouse, a black apron, and a small envelope with a name tag that said Emily on it in clean printed letters and $300 in 20s paper-clipped to an index card. The index card had a single line on it in a small, precise hand. "Hotel service entrance, 4 p.m. Saturday. Ask for Ramon." Manny watched her read it. He did not ask. She put the $300 in her apron pocket and folded the index card in half and tucked it into her bra, and Manny watched that too. And when she looked up at him, he shook his head slowly, once. "Scar." "Don't, Manny. I'm not saying anything." "You're saying plenty." "I'm saying I hope you know what you're doing." "I do." "That a promise?" "Manny, I swear to you, I swear on my dad, I know what I'm doing." It was not, strictly speaking, true. She did not know what she was doing, but it was true that she had decided to do it, which in her mind at that moment was close enough to the same thing that she could say it to Manny's face without flinching. The Belmar Hotel was the biggest building downtown, a 22-story granite thing that had been put up in 1923, back when Brenner's Point had briefly thought it was going to be a city that mattered. It still had the lobby from 1923, marble, brass, a ceiling painted with peeling cherubs, and it still put on a show for the people who ran the city, which on that Saturday night meant the Crane Foundation's annual charity auction for the Children's Burn Unit at St. Matthew's Hospital. The foundation was run by Leonardo's sister, Anna Crane Venturi, who was Marco's mother, who had been married to a man named Venturi who had died in a car accident on the Parkway in 2019 that Leonardo had told Scarlett quietly in the study on Thursday night had been a car accident. The service entrance was down an alley off Christian Street. Scarlett got there at 3:50 with the garment bag over her arm and her hair already up in the tight low knot she wore for work. Ramon turned out to be a thick-necked man in a banquet captain's vest who looked at her once, nodded as if somebody had already described her to him, and said, "You're Emily. You're on trays for cocktail hour. You work the ballroom floor. You don't go behind the bar. You don't go in the kitchen. You don't go past the coat check. Any problem? You find me. Bathroom's that door. You got 5 minutes to change. Go. She changed in a staff bathroom that smelled like industrial disinfectant and somebody else's perfume, and she pinned the Emily name tag to her blouse, and she looked at herself in the cracked mirror over the sink for maybe 10 seconds. She looked, she thought, like a waitress, which was good, which was the whole point, which had, apparently, been the whole point of her entire adult life up to this moment, although she had not known it until this week. She came out into the staging area at 4:07. There were 12 other servers in there, men and women, all in the same black and white. None of them looked at her twice. That too was the point. She worked the first hour of cocktails in a fog of concentration that felt almost like calm. Her tray was champagne flutes, which were the easiest thing in the world to serve because you did not have to speak. You just presented. You walked up to a group and you held the tray out and people took. You nodded. You moved on. You did not make eye contact. You refilled from the bar station near the coat check every time your tray was half empty. You smiled in the general direction of faces without ever actually looking at one. She had been doing a version of this at the Blue Gull for 4 years. The only difference was the room. The room was full of the kind of people she had only ever seen in newspapers. There was the mayor, or a man she thought was the mayor, a tall, hollow-cheeked black man in a tuxedo whose wife had on a dress the color of a good wine. There were 2 city council members she recognized from campaign signs. There was a woman in a silver jacket who she was pretty sure ran the biggest bank in the city. There was a police captain in his dress uniform standing by the bar with a Coke in his hand, watching the room without seeming to watch it, and she made herself not look at him twice. There was a priest in a black cassock and Roman collar standing near the silent auction tables, Father Joseph Aldesoro. She clocked him on her 3rd pass across the ballroom, and she did not let her eyes linger. He was exactly his photograph. Thinning hair, the kind face. He was holding a glass of white wine and talking to an older woman who Scarlett thought, from the shape of the nose and the carriage, must be Anna Crane Venturi, Leonardo's sister. The 2 of them were laughing at something. The priest, when he laughed, ducked his head slightly and his shoulders shook. It was a warm laugh. It was not the laugh of a man who had planted a listening device under the table, of the man who had buried his father. Belief is not the same as knowing, Scarlett thought. Belief is how you get caught. She kept moving. She found Sal Ruggiero at the bar. He was exactly his photograph too, heavy and jowly, and he had, in fact, the inside of his left cheek pulled in between his teeth in a way that was not quite chewing, but was on its way. He was talking to a man she did not recognize, and he was unhappy about something. His shoulders had that set. She drifted close enough to hear one sentence. I'm telling you, I don't care what the number says. The number is wrong. And somebody's got to go back and find me the piece that isn't on the page. And then she drifted away. Not her business. Or not yet. Marco Venturi she found near the stage. He was working the room. The way handsome young men who had not taken the bar exam worked rooms, shaking hands, laughing at jokes that were not funny, doing a thing with his left cuff every 30 seconds or so that was so exactly the thing Leonardo had described that Scarlett almost smiled. He was talking to a woman in her 60s in an emerald dress. He was leaning in. He was attentive. The woman was flattered. He was very good at this. He was too good at it, maybe. Regina Halliday she found at the far end of the room, standing with her back against a pillar. Exactly as described. Regina never sat with her back to a door, and apparently also never stood with her back to a door. She had a glass of soda water in her hand. Scarlett could tell because there was a slice of lime in it and no fizz left. And she was listening to a man talk at her with an expression of polite attention that Scarlett, who had made her living reading the faces of men, recognized immediately as the expression of a woman who was not listening to a word the man was saying and was instead scanning the room past his shoulder. Their eyes met for half a second. Regina's eyes went through her like she was a lamp. Scarlett moved on. Polly Deems she almost missed because Polly Deems was standing in a corner by the coat check looking small. He had on an ill-fitting suit that was probably 12 years old because 12 years was how long he had been in federal prison while suits had gotten narrower. He was drinking a beer out of a bottle, which nobody else in that room was drinking. Scarlett passed him with her tray, and Polly looked at her, and then he looked at the tray of champagne flutes, and then he looked back at his bottle, and his face did a small complicated thing, something like shame, or something like the memory of shame. and he tipped the bottle at her in a small old man salute, and she nodded back without meaning to. She felt for a moment sorry for him. She filed that feeling and kept walking. Danny Brescia she found last, and Danny Brescia was the one she did not like. Danny was in a black suit and a black shirt with no tie, and he was standing against the wall watching the door, and his neck tattoo was visible above the collar, and he was blinking at a normal rate, which was the terrifying thing, because Leonardo had said Danny blinked too much when he lied, and right now Danny was not lying. And Scarlett had not realized until this exact moment how much she had been hoping it would turn out to be Danny. Leonardo Crane himself was at the center of the room, in a perfectly cut black suit, with his sister on his arm. Anna Crane Venturi was a small, elegant woman in her early 50s and a dress the color of an oyster, and she laughed at things the way her brother almost never did. And she kissed cheeks and remembered names and moved through the room like a woman who had done this all her life. And Leonardo walked at her shoulder half a pace behind her and did the small, quiet job of being her brother in public. He did not once look in Scarlett's direction, which was exactly right, which was the whole agreement. The cocktail hour ended. They moved into the dinner portion of the evening. Scarlett was reassigned from champagne to bread service, which meant she now had to go table to table with a basket of rolls and a pair of silver tongs, which put her, for the first time, close enough to hear what people were saying. She made 14 passes in 30 minutes. She kept her face still. She listened. At the head table, Anna Crane Venturi was telling a story about her late husband that ended in laughter. At the second table, a city councilwoman was talking to a hospital administrator about bed capacity. At the third table, Marco Venturi was sitting next to a woman she did not recognize and was saying, No, that deal is dead. That deal is deader than dead. You don't need to worry about that deal anymore. She filed that. She did not know what it meant, but she filed it. At the fifth table, Sal Ruggiero was sitting next to Regina Halliday, and they were not talking to each other. That interested her. They had both been in the organization for over 2 decades. They should have been comfortable with each other. They were not. Regina had her body angled away from Sal by maybe 15 degrees, and Sal was eating his salad too fast, which was not what a heavy, jowly old bookkeeper did at a charity dinner, unless he was uncomfortable. At the seventh table, Paulie Deems was sitting alone at the end of a table of people he did not appear to know, and Paulie was staring down at his bread plate with an expression on his face that Scarlett, passing him the second time, understood with a small, cold jolt. Paulie was praying. Not in a showy way, not in a moving lips way, but he had his hands folded in his lap under the edge of the tablecloth, and his shoulders had the set of a man with a conversation going on inside his own head. And Scarlett, who had grown up next door to an old Italian widow who did the same thing at every meal, knew the posture. She did not know what Paulie Deems was praying about. She just knew that he was. At the eighth table, Father Aldosoro was talking to an elderly couple about, of all things, their grandchildren. He was asking the right questions. He was remembering the grandchildren's names back at the couple the second time. He was good with people. He was, by every measure Scarlett had, exactly what he looked like. Exactly a priest. Exactly a friend. She finished her bread rounds. She went back to the staging area to refill. She ran into Ramon, who looked her up and down and said, "You're quiet. I like quiet. Do the coffee service when the speeches start. Same tables." "Yes, sir." "Where you usually work?" "Diner on the south side." "Figures." He almost smiled. "You move like a diner girl. No wasted steps. Most of these kids they send me, it's like watching someone try to walk uphill in new shoes." He slapped the side of the silver coffee urn and went off to yell at somebody in the back. The speeches started at 8:15. Anna Crane Venturi got up to the microphone on the small stage, and she thanked everyone for coming, and she talked about the burn unit, and she talked about a 7-year-old girl named Anika who had been pulled out of a house fire in June, and the room went quiet, and the room listened, and Scarlett, moving between tables with the coffee urn, watched the 6 faces. Sal watched his plate. Marco watched his aunt at the microphone with an expression of practiced, attentive nephew that was so smooth it was almost, not quite, too smooth. Regina watched the room. Paulie watched his hands. Danny watched the door. Father Aldosoro watched Anna with the open, unguarded face of a man watching a woman he loved as a sister, and Scarlett, looking at him in that moment, understood with the kind of certainty she did not know how to justify or explain that Leonardo Crane had been right to doubt that his friend was his betrayer. It was not him. 5 faces left. The speeches ended at 8:45. The auction started. It was a silent auction for the first half and then a live auction with a paid auctioneer for the big items. And Scarlett did the coffee refills and the dessert service, and she kept her head down and she kept her ears open. And somewhere around 9:30, during the live auction when a man in a red bow tie was yelling cheerful numbers at a ballroom full of drunk rich people, something happened. She was refilling Marco Venturi's coffee. He was at the head table by then, one seat over from his mother, and Scarlett came around behind him with the silver urn and the little white cloth over her arm, and she leaned in to pour. And at exactly that moment, Marco's phone, which was face down on the table next to his dessert plate, buzzed once. He reached for it. He turned it over. Scarlett saw the screen. She did not mean to. She was pouring his coffee. But the screen was right there, 4 inches from her eyes. And the notification was a text message. And the first line of the text message, which was all she saw, was 3 words long. He knows. Abort. Marco's thumb came down on the screen and turned it black before she had finished pouring. She finished the pour. She set the urn down. She said quietly, "Cream, sir?" And Marco, without looking at her, said, "Black, thank you," in a voice that was perfectly even. She moved on to the next seat at the head table. She poured coffee for the woman in the emerald dress. She asked about cream. She did the smile at nothing. She moved on to the next seat. Inside her chest, her heart was doing a thing it had not done since the night at the diner. He knows. Abort. 3 words. No name on the sender as far as she had seen, but it was on Marco Venturi's phone, and the timing was not the timing of a man receiving news. The timing was the timing of a man who had been waiting for news and had just gotten it. He had not startled at the buzz. He had turned the phone over the way a man turns over a card he has been waiting all night for. She finished the table. She went back to the staging area. She put the coffee urn down on the side table and she said to Ramon, who was passing, "Bathroom, 2 minutes." And Ramon waved her off without looking. She went into the staff bathroom. She locked the stall door. She took her phone out. Her hands were shaking. She did a thing she had not done before, which was she did not call Dom. She typed a text to the number Leonardo had given her. She typed it fast with her thumbs, in that cramped stall with the smell of industrial disinfectant in her nose. Marco. His phone just now. Text said he knows. Abort. 3 words. She sent it. She stared at the screen. 3 seconds went by. 4. The 3 dots came up, meaning he was typing. They disappeared. They came up again. They disappeared. Then a single message came back. "Stay where you are, finish your shift, do not change anything." She stared at it. She read it twice. "Okay, she typed back. Then, because her hands were still shaking and she had 10 seconds before Ramon would start wondering where she was, she typed one more thing. "Are you okay?" The 3 dots came up. They stayed up for what felt like a long time. Then, "I am fine, Miss Vale. Thank you for asking. Finish your shift." She put her phone away. She flushed, though she had not used the toilet, because it seemed like the thing to do. She washed her hands. She looked at herself in the mirror for 2 full seconds, and she saw a woman with color high in her cheeks and eyes that were bright in a way she did not recognize, and she thought, "Get it together, Scar. Get it together." And she went back out, and she picked up the coffee urn, and she worked the rest of the auction, and she did not look at Marco Venturi again. She finished at 11:15. She changed back into her jeans and her jacket in the staff bathroom. She handed the garment bag back to Ramon, who nodded at her without saying anything. She walked out the service entrance into the alley off Creighton Street. The gray car was waiting at the mouth of the alley. Dom was at the wheel. She got in the back. "You see the boss?" "No, he's not coming back with us. He's got to stay for the end. I'm taking you home. You want to stop somewhere and eat?" "I couldn't eat." "Yeah." They drove. The downtown at 11:15 on a Saturday night was busy, in a way it never was otherwise, full of cabs and people in coats walking fast in the cold, and Scarlett watched them go by and thought, none of these people know. None of them know that right now, in that ballroom, something is happening. After a long silence, Dom said, "Boss told me what you saw." "Yeah." "You did good." "Dom." "Yeah." "Did Marco plant that thing in the diner?" "I don't know, miss." "You don't know or you won't say." "I don't know." "Do you have a guess?" Dom was quiet for a long while. His big hands were loose on the steering wheel. He drove the way men who had driven professionally for a long time drove, with no wasted motion at all, 2 fingers on the wheel at 10 and 2. "Miss," he said finally. "I've known Marco since he was 6 years old. I taught that kid to tie his shoes at his father's funeral. His old man had a brain bleed in his car on the parkway. Kid was 10. I went to his first communion. I went to his law school graduation. And I'm telling you right now, sitting in this car, I don't know. And that bothers me more than I can say out loud." "You think it's him?" "I think the text was on his phone." "The text might not have been from the person who planted it. Somebody else might have been tipping him off. He might be a victim too. He might be scared. The text said abort. Abort is a word a handler uses to an operator. If Marco is an operator, somebody above him is a handler. And somebody above Marco means somebody outside the 6, means a cop, means a fed, means worse." Dom looked at her in the rear view mirror. "Miss Vale." "Yeah. You've been thinking about this a lot." "Since the text, yeah." "You know what the boss is going to say when I tell him what you just said?" "Tell me." "He's going to say, 'That's the right question.'" They pulled up in front of her building. Dom walked her to the vestibule again and watched her through the wire glass until she was up the first flight, and he drove away. She went upstairs. She put the chain on the door. She sat down on her kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, and she put her hands on her knees and she breathed, slow, in and out, for a long time. Her phone buzzed. It was Leonardo. "Home?" "Yes, sleep. We talk tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. Dom will bring you up." "Okay." There was a pause. 3 dots. Then, "Miss Vale, you were right tonight. About the handler. There is someone above Marco, if it is Marco. That changes what we are doing. I will explain tomorrow. Sleep if you can." She read it 3 times. Then she sat on her kitchen floor for another 20 minutes with her back against the cabinets. Not crying, not sleeping, just sitting there with the cold linoleum under her and her own heartbeat in her ears. And she thought about a 10-year-old boy named Marco Venturi having his shoelaces tied by a man named Dom at his father's funeral. And she thought about Paulie Deems praying into his bread plate. And she thought about Father Aldesoro laughing at something Anna had said. And she thought about the slate-colored eyes of a man in a cardigan in a study lit by firelight saying, "I am not a clean man, Miss Vale." And somewhere in all of that, she understood something she had not understood until that moment, which was that this was no longer a thing she was doing for money, or for the debt at her mother's facility, or even for the memory of her father sitting at a Blue Gull counter 11 Wednesdays a year for 11 years trying to put Leonardo Crane in a cell. This was a thing she was doing because she had become, somewhere in the last 72 hours, the only person in the whole tangled mess who could see all of it at once. And she did not yet know what she was going to do with that. But she knew she was not going to walk away. Not tonight. Not anymore. She got up off the kitchen floor. She drank a glass of water at the sink. She went to bed with her clothes still on. And somewhere across the city, in a ballroom at the Belmar Hotel, a man in a perfectly cut black suit was saying goodbye to the last of the guests, and smiling at his sister, and kissing her cheek, and walking out into the cold with Dom's replacement at his elbow. And nobody in that ballroom had any idea at all that the evening had already been decided, hours before, by a waitress named Emily refilling a coffee cup at the head table. She slept harder than she had any right to expect. When she woke, the Sunday light was already high in the window, and her phone said 11:04. And she lay there for a minute with her cheek on the pillow and her clothes still wrinkled on her body from the night before, and thought, without meaning to, about her father. He used to work Saturday nights, and on Sunday mornings when she was small, he would let her climb into the bed next to her mother while he made coffee downstairs. And the whole house would smell like coffee, and her mother would be warm and half asleep and smell like lavender hand cream, and her father would come back up with 2 mugs and set one on the nightstand and sit on the edge of the bed and drink his out of the other one and tell them both, in his quiet voice, about his shift. He had never lied to her mother about his shift. She understood that for the first time, lying there in her apartment at 11:04 on a Sunday. He had told her mother everything, and her mother had listened, and that was the thing about her parents that she had never understood as a child, and was only beginning to understand now, which was that their marriage had been a thing built out of the refusal to pretend. She got up. She made coffee. She drank it standing at the window in a pair of sweatpants, looking down at Sibley Avenue, which was Sunday morning quiet. A man walked a big yellow dog. A woman in a church coat got into a taxi. A kid on a bike with training wheels wobbled along the sidewalk with his father running behind him, holding the back of the seat. Ordinary. Somewhere across the city, in a stone house on a bluff, Leonardo Crane was probably reading a newspaper with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, deciding how much to tell her this afternoon. And somewhere in another part of the city, Marco Venturi was probably waking up and reaching for his phone and looking at the text from the night before and feeling, for the first time since the planning had started on whatever the planning had been, the cold little pull of a man who knew that something had gone wrong. She hoped it was cold for him. She was surprised by that, by the small, mean heat of the thought. She had not realized until that moment how much she disliked Marco Venturi. She had met the man for 30 seconds across a diner table and seen him for 3 hours across a ballroom, and she had disliked him the whole time without naming it, and now, in her kitchen, in her sweatpants, with her first cup of coffee going cold in her hand, she was naming it. She disliked him because he was too smooth, and because he fiddled with his cuff, and because he had let Dom tie his shoes at his father's funeral, and then grown up into the kind of man who would sell out the uncle who had raised him. She was getting ahead of the evidence. She knew she was. But her gut was ahead of the evidence, and her gut was the only part of her that had been right about any of this so far. So she was going to listen to it. Dom picked her up at 1:45. He was in a third car this time, a green one, nondescript. He drove her up to the bluffs in silence. At the gate he said, "You eat, miss. Toast. He'll feed you. He always feeds people." "I'm okay. Suit yourself." At the house, the gray cat was again on the porch railing, though Scarlett suspected now that this might simply be where the cat lived. The front door opened before she had reached the top step. Leonardo was in jeans and a flannel shirt, which was even more disorienting than the cardigan had been, and he held the door for her and said, "Miss Vale? Thank you. Come in. Kitchen, today, if that's all right." "Kitchen is fine." The kitchen was at the back of the house, off the study, and it was a big room with a long, scarred wooden table and copper pots hanging from a beam and a window that looked out over a yard with an apple tree in it. The apple tree was bare. There was a fire going in a small stone fireplace in the corner, which was a thing Scarlett had not known kitchens could have. Maggie, the old dog, was sprawled in front of it on a rag rug, and she thumped her tail twice when Scarlett walked in and did not get up. "Sit, please. I made soup." "You made soup." "I did. It is Sunday. I make soup on Sunday. It is one of the only 3 things I cook. My sister has pointed this out to me on more than one occasion." He ladled soup into 2 bowls from a pot on the stove. It was a minestrone, with good bread torn in pieces on a board on the table, and a dish of olive oil, and a small bowl of parmesan. And Scarlett sat down at the scarred wooden table across from Leonardo Crane, and looked at the food, and realized that she was very hungry, and that she was also, and this was the stranger fact, not afraid. Somewhere between last night and now she had stopped being afraid of this man. She was not sure yet what to do with that information. They ate for a few minutes without speaking. He broke bread. She dipped hers in the oil. The fire popped. Maggie sighed. Finally he set his spoon down. "Miss Vale?" "Mr. Crane." "Leonardo, please." "We are past Mr. Crane. It is Sunday. My kitchen." "Leonardo." "Good. Thank you. I am going to tell you 3 things, and then I am going to ask you 1 question, and then I am going to tell you what I think we do next. Is that all right with you?" "That's all right with me." "The first thing is this. Last night, after the auction, after I got home, Dom and I spent 2 hours looking at the timing of that text. Do you remember what time it came in?" 9:31. "Good. That is what Dom said. He has the time noted down from when you first told him in the car. At 9:31, Marco Venturi received the text that said, 'He knows. Abort.' At 9:14, 17 minutes earlier, a man walked into my house." She set her spoon down. "Your house. This house." "This house? I was not here. I was at the auction." "Dom was not here. Dom was at the auction. The only person in this house at 9:14 was Elena, the woman who has kept my house for 11 years. She was upstairs putting clean sheets on my bed. She heard the alarm beep in the way it beeps when someone who knows the code comes in through the side door. She called out. Nobody answered. She came down. There was nobody in the kitchen. There was nobody in the study. The side door was closed. The alarm was rearmed. Everything looked the way she had left it. She thought she had imagined it. She did not call Dom. She did not call me. She finished the sheets and she went home at 10:30, which is her normal time on a Saturday. Someone was in your house. Someone was in my house. With your alarm code. With my alarm code, which exactly 4 people have. Myself, Dom, Elena, and... He paused. He looked into the fire. Marco. Why does Marco have your alarm code? Because he is my nephew. Because when my sister and I were going to Italy 4 years ago for 2 weeks, he watered the plants. And because I never changed it back. Leonardo. I know. So at 9:14 last night, someone with your alarm code came into this house and did something that took less than 17 minutes, and at 9:31, the person who had done it, or the person they had been doing it for, texted Marco at the auction that you knew, that they had to abort. Which means they found something, which means you have something in this house that a person who was looking for it would find in under 17 minutes. And when they found it, they would know that you knew about the bug in the diner. Leonardo Crane looked at her across the scarred wooden table. His reading glasses were pushed up on his forehead, and his flannel shirt had a small tear at the cuff, and he looked, in that moment, like a man who had aged 2 years in the last 2 days. You have a fast mind, Miss Vale. What did they find? A notebook. A specific notebook. It was not hidden well. It was in the top drawer of the desk in the study. It was there on purpose. On purpose? Yes. You left it on purpose. You left it there last week. Before the diner. Yes. Because you already knew. I did not know who. I knew there was a problem. I have suspected there was a problem for 2 months. I have been leaving that notebook in that drawer for 6 weeks, waiting for someone to look at it. It contains the names of 3 men who do not exist, a phone number for a shipping company that does not exist, and a note in my handwriting saying that I am meeting these 3 men at the diner on Thursday at 8:30. The whole notebook is theater. It is a play I wrote for one person, and I did not yet know who that person was, and I was waiting for them to tell me. The bug under the table was the tell. The bug told me which play the audience was watching. It told me that whoever was watching me had read the notebook, because the notebook was how they learned I was going to be at the diner. But the bug did not tell me who had read the notebook, because the notebook had been sitting in an unlocked desk drawer for 6 weeks. Anyone could have read it. It was still a list of 6. And then I saw the bug, and then you saw the bug, and I had to change my plan. Because once I knew about the bug, I had to get out of the diner without letting the person listening know that I knew about the bug. Which I did. I finished my veal. I complimented the restaurant. I left $200. I was ordinary. If the person listening was any good at their job, and they were, they heard nothing last night that told them anything had changed. They thought I was oblivious. They thought the play was still running. Until last night at the auction. Until last night at the auction. Because last night at the auction, I told 3 people, 3 of the 6, that I had decided to move the notebook from the drawer in the study to a safe deposit box on Monday morning because my insurance company had been after me to keep valuable papers in a bank. I told each of the 3 in a way that sounded casual. I told Sal. I told Regina. I told Father Aldosoro. I told them each separately, each out of earshot of the others, each at a different point in the evening. If the bug planner was one of those 3, they now had a problem. Their window for reading that notebook was about to close. They would have to read it tonight or lose access forever. And the only way to read it tonight was to go to my house. And the only way to go to my house was to have the alarm code. But only Marco has the alarm code. Yes. So Marco was always the runner. Whichever one of the 3 you told, they had to use Marco to get in. Which means the bug planter is one of the other 3 who you told, plus Marco is their inside access. Yes. So it is Sal, Regina, or Father Aldosoro, plus Marco. Yes. But it isn't Father Aldosoro. Leonardo looked at her. What I? Because I watched him for 3 hours last night, and he did not fold his napkin once. Leonardo Crane set down his spoon. He looked at her with something that might, in a more smiling man, have been amazement. You remembered the napkin. You told me the napkin. I remembered the napkin. Miss Vale, I watched him listen to your sister's speech about the little girl from the fire. I watched him laugh at a joke Anna told him. I watched him talk to an old couple about their grandchildren and remember their grandchildren's names the second time. He is not your betrayer. I cannot prove it to a jury, but I'm telling you, from where I was standing, it is not him. Leonardo was quiet for a long moment. Then it is Sal or Regina. Yes. Sal has been with my family since before I was born. I know. Regina has run the legitimate side of my business for 11 years and never once stolen a dime. I know. My sister is going to be heartbroken whichever one it is. She loves them both. Sal is Marco's godfather. Regina gave my sister her life back after her husband died. Regina is the person my sister calls at 3 a.m. when she cannot sleep. Leonardo. Yes. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think about it before you answer. Ask. Marco's father, your sister's husband, the car accident on the Parkway in 2019. You told me on Thursday night that it was a car accident. You said it with an emphasis. The emphasis meant it wasn't. Somebody put him in that crash. I've been thinking about it for 3 days. The kitchen was very quiet. The fire popped. Maggie, the old dog, lifted her head, looked at them both, and laid it back down. Yes, Leonardo said. Who? I don't know. You never found out. I never found out. And I looked hard for 2 years. And I came up empty, which is very unusual for me. Whoever did it was better than I am, which meant one of two things. It meant either somebody from out of town came in and did it and left, which was my working theory for 18 months, or it meant it was somebody inside. It was somebody inside. I came around to that in the 3rd year, and once I came around to it, I could not let it go, which is when I started noticing small things. Numbers in the books that did not quite match. A shipment that came in a day late and nobody had an explanation for. A cousin of a cousin in Providence who got picked up on charges that should not have stuck but stuck anyway. Small things. Nothing I could build a case on. Nothing I could take to the only man I would ever take such a case to, who is Dom. Because Dom would have killed someone on my behalf based on feelings alone, and I did not want to kill the wrong person. So I waited, and I set out the notebook. And I waited some more. And then I walked up to your table with a bottle of wine. And then you walked up to my table with a bottle of wine. She thought about Marco Venturi. She thought about a little boy having his shoelaces tied at his father's funeral by a big man named Dom. She thought about a man in a car on a parkway, and the last thing he saw, and the question of whether Marco Venturi had been on the inside of his own father's death, or whether Marco Venturi had no idea at all, or whether Marco Venturi was somewhere in between, which was maybe the saddest possibility of the three. Leonardo. Yes, if Marco knew, if he's been working with whichever of them it is for years, if he was part of the thing that killed his own father, I have thought about it. Have you? I have thought about nothing else since last night. I have sat up with it. I am sitting with it now. I do not have an answer for you, Miss Vale. I hope he did not know. I would like very much to believe that whichever of them it is, Sal or Regina, pulled my nephew in slowly, kept him in the dark about his father, used him as a runner because the boy had the alarm code and a grudge he did not know the real size of. I would like to believe that, but I will not know until we know, and we will know soon. How? That is the question I was going to ask you. You were going to ask me how. I was going to ask you how. Scarlett sat back in her chair. She looked at the fire. She looked at the old dog. She looked at the small tear at the cuff of Leonardo Crane's flannel shirt. She thought. The notebook, she said. What about it? You told 3 people last night that the notebook was moving to a bank on Monday morning. One of those 3 went into this house with Marco at 9:14, took pictures of the notebook, left, and told Marco to send the abort text because by the time they had the notebook photographed, they had also realized that the notebook was theater. They had realized it was a setup. That's what the text meant. He knows. You know they were looking. You know they read the notebook. The abort wasn't about the diner. The abort was about whatever operation they were running to take you down. The abort meant stop trusting what the notebook says. He's feeding us fakes, back out of the plan we built around it. Yes. So right now this afternoon, whichever of the 2 of them, Sal or Regina, is your betrayer, that person is scared. They are more scared than they have been in this entire 2-year thing, because they just realized that you have been running a play on them, and they don't know how long you have been running it, and they don't know what else is theater. They are sitting somewhere right now, this very minute, trying to figure out whether you know about them specifically, or whether you just know there is a leak in the organization and have been flushing it generally. If it's the first, they have to run. If it's the second, they can stay and pretend and hope. They're trying to figure out which one it is, and the only way they can figure out which one it is if they contact their handler. Yes, their handler, the one who sent the text, which means there is going to be a phone call or a meeting or a dead drop between now and tomorrow morning. There has to be. Because the handler and the operator have to decide together whether the operation is burned or whether it can be saved. And if we can see that phone call or that meeting or that dead drop, we know who the handler is and we know who the operator is, and we know both of them at the same time. Miss Vale. Yes. You are describing surveillance. I'm describing surveillance of 2 specific people for a window of less than 24 hours, with only Dom and myself and you. Yes. Which is not possible. Which is not possible with just the 3 of us. So what are you proposing? Scarlett looked at him across the scarred wooden table. I'm proposing that you have to give up 2 of the 6. Not to us, to somebody else. You have to tell 2 people who you trust absolutely, not the 6, 2 different people, 2 of Dom's guys, to sit on Sal and Regina for the next 24 hours. You pay them well. You tell them nothing about why. You tell them it is a protection detail. You tell them Sal and Regina are being followed by people who might try to hurt them, and your people are the ones watching for those people. So when Sal or Regina goes to make the call or the meeting or the drop, Dom's guys follow along without Sal or Regina ever knowing they are being followed by us. They think they are being followed by the enemy, so they don't try to shake the tail. They lead us right to the handler, and we have them both. Leonardo Crane set down his spoon. He looked at her for a long time. Then he laughed. It was a short laugh, not a happy one. A laugh of a man recognizing something. Miss Vale. Yes. Your father would be, I think, extremely proud and extremely unhappy. Both at once, yes. He raised you, didn't he? He raised me. It shows. He got up. He went to the old phone hanging on the kitchen wall, which was a rotary phone, an actual rotary phone, the kind that you had to dial with your finger in the holes. He did not pick it up. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he turned back to her. There is one thing wrong with your plan. Tell me. Polly Deems. Polly. Polly is one of the 6. You cleared Father Aldesoro from the list. You did not clear Polly. I think you were about to, but you have not said it, and I am not going to let you forget about him. Polly served 11 years in federal prison. Polly came out of that prison without his teeth, and without his wife, and without his son. Polly hates this life. Polly has told me twice in the last year that he hates this life. Polly has more reason than anyone in the organization to want to hand me to the federal government, and Polly has been quiet for a very long time. And quiet men in our business are either loyal or they are waiting. Scarlett thought about Polly Deems standing in the corner at the auction with the beer bottle and the 12-year-old suit. She thought about him at the table during the speeches, with his hands folded in his lap and his lips not moving, but his shoulders set, praying. He was praying last night. Polly prays. Polly has prayed every day of his life. His mother was from Palermo and she raised him to pray. That is not evidence. I know, I'm thinking out loud. Think more, she thought. She thought about the way Polly had looked at the tray of champagne flutes and then looked away, with shame on his face. She thought about the small salute with the beer bottle. She thought about how he had not, all night, gone anywhere near Marco Venturi. She thought about the fact that a man who was running an operation with Marco would have, at some point in a 3-hour cocktail hour and dinner, at least nodded at him from across a room. Polly had not. Polly had not looked at Marco once, either because he was disciplined or because he had no reason to. Leonardo. Yes. Polly didn't look at Marco last night, not once. I watched. You watched for Polly looking at Marco. I watched for everyone looking at everyone. That is what you pay me for. He smiled, the small, tight smile that was, on him, the equivalent of another man laughing out loud. Yes, that is what I pay you for. Polly is not the one. He was sad last night, and he was praying, and I think maybe he is the kind of man who is quietly not very well, but he is not running an operation against you with your nephew. He hasn't got the stomach for it anymore. Prison took it out of him. That was what I saw on his face. It wasn't guilt, it was tiredness. I would stake a lot on it. Miss Vale. Yes. If you are wrong about Polly, and it is him, we are going to have a problem. I know. But you are not wrong, no? All right. Polly is out. Aldesordo is out. Danny is not it. Why?
But they...
Because Danny is not smart enough to run this for 2 years without being noticed. Danny is a knife. He is not a handler. He is not an operator. He is somebody's tool. And whoever's tool he is, he would have told them by now, by accident, who he was working for. Somebody would have heard. Somebody would have noticed. Danny's hands are on too many things to be running something this tight. Sal or Regina. Sal or Regina. And Marco is the runner. Yes. Then, Leonardo Crane said, and he took his reading glasses off his forehead and set them carefully on the kitchen table and rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers. We are going to run your play. I will put Tony Salcedo on Sal. I will put Vince Morrow on Regina. Both of them are loyal to Dom, not to me, which is a distinction that matters in this particular case. I will tell them it is a protection detail, the way you said. I will tell them what to look for. I will tell them nothing about the notebook or the auction or why I care. They will not ask. And Marco? Marco I will handle myself. Marco is coming to dinner here tomorrow night. I invited him this morning. He does not know that I know. He thinks he is coming to dinner with his uncle. He will come. He will sit at this table. He will eat whatever I feed him. And I will decide, Miss Vale, somewhere during that dinner, what kind of man my sister's son turned out to be. Leonardo. Yes, don't decide that tomorrow night, please. Let him say what he says. Let him eat. Let him leave. Let us find out first who is steering him. You don't want to look at Marco and decide about Marco before you know whether Marco is Regina's puppet, or Sal's puppet, or the federal government's puppet, or his own man. You will hate yourself if you decide too soon. You told me on Thursday you were not a clean man, but you had tried to run a dirty business cleanly. This is one of the clean things. Let him speak. Let him leave. Let the surveillance do its job, and then decide. Leonardo Crane looked at her for a long moment. Miss Vale. Yes. Why do you care what I hate myself for? She had not expected the question. It caught her wrong. She opened her mouth and closed it. The fire popped. The old dog sighed. I don't know, she said, which was a lie, and both of them in the kitchen knew it was a lie. I just don't want you to do a thing you can't take back while we still have time to be smarter than the thing. He looked at her for one more long beat. Then he nodded, small and slow. All right, he said. We do it your way. Tomorrow night Marco eats. We watch. We wait. We see who reaches for whom. He walked her to the front door. The October afternoon had gone gray and cold, and the gray cat was gone from the porch railing, which Scarlett took, absurdly, as a small bad omen. Dom was outside by the car, standing with his hands in his pockets, not smoking this time. At the doorway, Leonardo stopped her with a hand that did not quite touch her elbow. Miss Vale? Yes. Thank you for the soup. You made the soup. Thank you for eating it. She walked down the 3 stone steps, and she got in the green car, and Dom drove her back down the bluff toward the harbor, and neither of them spoke for a long time. At the first red light, he looked at her in the rear view. He told you about the notebook. Yes. He told you about Marco's father. Yes. He's never told anybody about Marco's father. I think he had to, Dom. Yeah, Dom said, and he watched the light turn green. Yeah, I think he did too. They drove. The city slid past. Scarlett sat in the back seat with her hands folded in her lap, the way they had been folded in her lap that first night, 1 week ago, a lifetime ago. And she watched the lights of the harbor come on one by one in the cold gray afternoon, and she thought about a man at a kitchen table asking her, across a bowl of soup, why she cared what he hated himself for, and she thought about the fact that she had not answered, And she thought about the fact that in some quiet, shifting way, she did not have a name for yet. The answer was beginning to matter more than she was ready to admit. Monday came in gray and tight, the kind of October Monday where the wind off the harbor pushed up through the streets of Brenner's Point and got into your coat at the neck no matter how high you turned the collar. Scarlett worked the lunch shift at the Blue Gull because that was what her life was supposed to look like on the outside. And she worked it well, and Manny watched her work it without saying anything, and she was grateful for the watching and grateful for the not saying. The lunch rush passed. The afternoon slowed down the way afternoons slowed down. At 3:15, her phone buzzed once against the inside of her apron pocket, and she took it into the walk-in cooler to look at it because the walk-in was the only place in the diner you could be alone. The message was from Dom. 3 words. Regina, just now. She stood there in the cold white light of the walk-in with her hand on the door to steady herself, and she read it 3 times, and then she put the phone back in her pocket and came out of the cooler and finished wiping down her tables. Her face did not change. That was one of the things she was finding out about herself this week, that her face, when she needed it to, did not change. It was Regina. She had understood it somewhere in herself on Sunday night, lying in bed, and now the understanding had a confirmation attached to it, and she did not feel triumph, only a small, tired grief she had not expected. Regina Halliday was the most competent human being Leonardo Crane had ever employed. Regina had given his sister her life back after her husband died. Regina was the person Anna called at 3 in the morning when she could not sleep. Regina, it turned out, was also the person who for 2 years had been building a federal case against the man who paid her and who had used as her instrument the dead man's son. Scarlett clocked out at 4. She did not go home. She got into the back of the green car where Dom was waiting, half a block down Sibley, and she said, "Tell me." Tony had eyes on Sal from 9 this morning. Sal went to church. Sal went to the bakery. Sal went to the bookkeeping office. Sal ate a sandwich at his desk. Sal did not call anyone he does not call every day. Sal is clean. And Regina. Regina left her apartment at 11. She drove to a coffee shop in Old Craigton. She sat alone for 40 minutes. She drank 1 coffee. She used her phone twice. Vince could not see what she typed, but he was close enough to see that she was doing something small and fast, like a short message to a number she did not usually message, because she was holding the phone in her lap under the table. In that way, people hold phones when they are texting somebody they should not be texting. Then at 12:05, a woman sat down at her table. Mid-30s. Brown hair, short, business coat, plain. The woman had a coffee already in her hand when she sat down, which meant she had been in the shop before Regina got there, watching. They talked for 16 minutes. Vince could not hear them. At the end of the 16 minutes, the woman got up and walked out, and Regina sat there for another 10 minutes by herself before she left. Vince followed the woman. The woman walked 2 blocks east and got into a dark blue sedan. Vince got the plate. And? The plate is registered to a federal motor pool. The plate is a Fed plate, miss. Regina Halliday met a federal agent at a coffee shop this afternoon. Scarlett let out a long, slow breath she had not known she had been holding. Okay? The boss knows. He's asked you to come up to the house at 6. Marco is still coming to dinner at 7. The boss wants a half hour with you before Marco gets there. Dom. Yeah. Is he going to be okay? Dom did not answer for a moment. He watched the road. I don't know, miss. He's been in that kitchen since I called him. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't made a call. He's sitting at the table in that flannel shirt, and he's looking at his hands. I've known him 31 years. I've seen him bury his father. I've seen him bury his brother-in-law. I've never seen him look the way he's looking right now. Because it's Regina. Because it's Regina. And because Regina means Marco. And Marco means... Dom's voice got tight, and he stopped and worked his jaw and tried again. Marco was my job, miss. I was the one who picked him up from school when Anna was at the hospital with her husband the week before he died. I was the one who sat with him in the ER waiting room. I was the one who told him his daddy was gone. The boss had me do it because he couldn't. I was supposed to look out for that kid. I don't know what I missed. I don't know when I missed it. I've been driving in circles for 4 hours trying to figure out when I missed it. Dom. Yeah. You didn't miss it. Regina did it on purpose. Regina is a professional. Regina did not let anybody see. That is what she is good at. That is why she is the person we are talking about. Dom did not answer. He drove up into the bluffs. The gray cat was on the porch railing when they pulled up, and this time Scarlett understood that the gray cat was a fixed point in the world, which was a comforting thought to have briefly before she walked into that kitchen. Leonardo was where Dom had said he would be. At the kitchen table, in the same flannel shirt with the tear at the cuff, reading glasses folded on the wood in front of him, hands laid flat on the table on either side of the glasses, as if he were pressing the wood down to keep it from floating away. The fire in the little hearth was low. Maggie, the old dog, was in her place on the rag rug, and she thumped her tail twice when Scarlett came in, and Scarlett thought, "Good dog. Thank you. Good dog." And she sat down across from him. "Leonardo. Miss Vale. Scarlett, it is Monday. Your kitchen." The corner of his mouth moved. "Scarlett. You haven't eaten." "No. Eat something." "I will." "When?" "Soon." She looked at him across the table. He did not look older today. That was the surprise. On Sunday, when he had first told her about the notebook, he had looked like a man who had aged 2 years. Today, he did not look older. He looked peeled. He looked like a man who had been carrying a particular weight for a long time and had set the weight down for one afternoon and was sitting with the strange light feeling of having set it down and was trying to figure out what kind of man he was. Without it. "Scarlett." "Yes." "I have known Regina for 11 years. "I know." "I trained her myself." "I know." "She is the best person I have ever worked with in my entire professional life. She is smarter than I am by a meaningful margin. I have known this for a long time. I have been fine with it because I thought she was mine. I thought she had chosen to be mine." "Leonardo." "What? Why do you think she did it?" He looked at her for a long second. He seemed to be turning the question over, weighing it, looking at the underside of it. "I've been sitting here for 4 hours asking myself that question. I have 3 theories. The first is that she was compromised. Federal agents caught her doing something, personally, not for us, and the only way out was to turn. The second is that she was always federal. She was an undercover agent who took 11 years to set up a single case, which happens, and which would be, if it is true, the most patient and professional operation I have ever been on the wrong end of. The third is that she meant it. Yes. That she came here 11 years ago, saw what we were, decided she was going to take it down, and spent 11 years inside waiting for the right moment. Yes. Which one do you believe?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I believe the third," he said finally. "I believe it because of what I know about her, and because of what I know about her family. She had a brother. I never met him. He was a pharmacist in New Jersey. He was good at his job. He got himself hooked on the pills, the way pharmacists sometimes do. He was dead in 18 months. Dead at 28. She told me about him once, years ago, 2 drinks in, at a Christmas party. She said, 'People who sell that stuff are the devil, Leo.' The actual devil. I said to her, 'Regina, we don't sell that stuff.' And she said, 'I know you don't, Leo. I know.' And she left it there. And I thought at the time she was telling me she was all right working for me because I was not that kind of man. I thought she was drawing a line for herself and telling me the line was one I had not crossed. I was so sure of that, I never thought about it again. And I am sitting here now, Scarlett, thinking that she was not telling me about my line. She was telling me about her line. And she had decided that even though I did not sell that stuff, I was adjacent enough to the people who did, and I was protected enough by this city that nobody was ever going to touch me for it. And she had decided 11 years ago that the way she was going to honor her brother was to be the person who finally did." Scarlett sat with that for a long moment. "Leonardo." "Yes." "She isn't wrong, is she?" He looked at her. "No," he said. "She isn't wrong. That's hard. That is very hard." "Leonardo." "Yes." "The thing I asked you on Thursday night, about the people selling fentanyl in this city, about whether you would tell me who they were before we were done. You said you would think about it." "I have." "And?" He stood up. He walked to the drawer under the telephone on the wall. He opened it. He took out a single folded piece of paper. He came back to the table and sat down and slid the paper across to her. "That is 7 names," he said. 4 of them are in this city. 3 are in Providence. I have written them down in my own handwriting because I have never written them down before, in any form, ever. And I wanted the paper that first held them to be the paper I gave you. I have been holding these names for 6 years. I have not moved on them because moving on them would have cost me a war I was not in a position to win. Regina apparently decided 11 years ago that my not moving on them was the same thing as protecting them. I am not sure she is wrong. I am giving them to you because I said I would think about it, and I have, and my answer is yes. Do with them what you want. If you want to give them to the federal agent Regina has been talking to, I will not stop you. If you want to give them to your father's old partner, I will not stop you. If you want to burn the paper, I will not stop you. They are yours. She looked at the paper. She did not unfold it. She put her hand flat on top of it, on the table. Leonardo. Yes. Thank you. Don't thank me. It is 6 years overdue. I am thanking you anyway. They sat with it for a moment. Then she said, What are you going to do about Regina? I'm going to do what you told me to do yesterday. I'm going to let Marco eat his dinner. I'm going to let him go home. I am going to have Dom's people stay on Regina until morning. In the morning, before she goes to work, I am going to walk into her apartment, alone, and I am going to sit down at her kitchen table, and I am going to tell her that I know, and I am going to tell her that I am not going to hurt her, and I'm going to tell her that her best option, if she wants to keep the case against me that she has built for 11 years, is to take what she has and go to her people and file it today, because after today, every piece of it that mentions Marco Venturi, I will have already given to the federal prosecutor myself through a lawyer before her people can move on it. Which means her case becomes a case about an organization that voluntarily gave up its own courier, which is a different case, which is a case she might still win, which is a case that, if I am lucky, and if the prosecutor is a reasonable person, which they sometimes are, costs me a year of my life in a minimum security facility in West Virginia instead of the 20 years she has been building for. I will take the year. I will do the year gladly. In exchange for that year, I will keep my sister's son alive, and I will keep my sister's son out of prison, and I will let the woman who spent 11 years avenging her brother have the satisfaction of knowing she ended me, even though she will not have ended me as completely as she wanted to. Ikin Leonardo. What? You are going to turn yourself in. I'm going to turn myself in, partially, for a year. In exchange for my nephew and for her win, yes. Your empire. My empire was going to end anyway, Scarlett. Regina saw that before I did. She was right. Everybody who runs what I run ends up in a box or a cell, eventually. I have run mine for 22 years with almost no blood and almost no young dead people and almost no families destroyed, which is more than most in my line can say, but it is not zero, and I have been tired for a long time. I'm not going to pretend to you that I am a good man because I am willing to take a year. I am taking the year because the alternative is my sister burying her son, and I'm not going to do that to her twice in one lifetime. Leonardo. What? The fentanyl names. Yes. Give them to the federal agent, the one Regina has been meeting, through Regina, tomorrow morning. When you sit down at Regina's kitchen table, give them to her. Tell her they are a gift. Tell her they are the beginning of something else she can do with her career. Tell her... She stopped. Her voice had gotten unsteady. She swallowed and tried again. Tell her that her brother's name doesn't have to be only the name of a man who died. It can also be the name of 7 people who stopped selling what killed him. Because of her. Because she spent 11 years inside a dirty room waiting for the right moment. Not the moment to take you down. The moment to take them down. You give her those names. You give her the year. You give her all of it. You don't hold anything back. And you tell her it is not a deal. You tell her it is thanks. Leonardo Crane looked at her across the kitchen table with the slate-colored eyes that had 1 week ago weighed her for the first time across a diner floor. They were the same eyes. They were also, she understood, not the same eyes at all. Scarlett. Yes. You are going to be a problem for somebody someday. You said that already. I am revising it. You are going to be a problem for a lot of people. For a lot of years. You are a certain kind of dangerous Miss Vale that I have not met before, and I have met many kinds. Is that a compliment? It is the most serious one I know how to give. Marco Venturi arrived at 7:04. He was dressed in a dark gray sweater and jeans, and he had brought a bottle of wine, and he hugged his uncle at the door the way a man hugs the uncle who raised him, and Leonardo hugged him back the same way. And Scarlett, watching from the hallway, thought, he does not know. He does not know what his uncle knows. He thinks he is here for dinner. And then, a second behind that thought, the worse one. He does not know that his father did not die in an accident either. He has not been told. He has been used without being told. Dinner was roast chicken and potatoes and green beans and more of Sunday's bread. Leonardo had, in the hour since Scarlett and he had talked, gotten up and made dinner, the way a man makes dinner when he has decided a thing and wants to be busy with his hands. Marco ate. He talked. He told a funny story about a judge they both knew. He asked about Maggie the dog. He was warm and easy, the way Scarlett had watched him be warm and easy at the auction. She watched his left cuff the whole meal. He fiddled with it twice. Both times were moments when he was telling a rehearsed story. Both times the stories were small and harmless. He was, she understood, a man who rehearsed small harmless stories as a habit of manner, not as an instrument of betrayal. The tell Leonardo had catalogued in his nephew over 20 years was not a tell of lying. It was a tell of a young man who had been trained by a woman who was not his mother to perform. When the pie came out, an apple pie Leonardo had taken from the freezer and warmed, one of the 3 things he cooked, Leonardo set down his fork and said quietly, "Marco." "Yeah, Uncle Leo." "I want to tell you something. I want you to listen all the way through before you say anything." Marco's face did a small confused thing. "Okay." "Your father did not die in a car accident." The kitchen went very still. The fire popped. Maggie, the old dog, lifted her head. Marco put his fork down. His face did a thing Scarlett would think about for a long time afterward. It went through 3 stages in about 2 seconds. The first stage was a kind of reflexive disbelief, the "what are you saying" flicker. The second stage was something more complicated, something that looked almost like recognition, as if a small dark thought he had carried for 5 years without letting himself finish it had suddenly been finished for him by somebody else. The third stage was nothing. His face went blank. "Uncle Leo, your father was killed, Marco. I don't know by whom. I have looked for 5 years and I have not found out. But someone in my business killed him because they wanted something he had and he wouldn't give it to them. I have kept that from you because I did not want you to live inside it. Your mother does not know, and I am not going to tell her. You are going to decide in the next 10 seconds whether I was right to keep it from you or wrong to keep it from you, and you are going to say which out loud. And then we are going to keep going with what I have to tell you. Go." Marco looked at his plate. He looked at his uncle. He looked for 1/2 second at Scarlett. And Scarlett, who had not been formally introduced to him, and who was, as far as Marco knew, a waitress his uncle had asked to help in the kitchen, understood that he had clocked her as something other than a waitress and was filing it for later. Then he looked back at his uncle. "I think I knew," Marco said. His voice was not quite his voice. "I think I always knew. A little." "Yes, you were right to wait." "Thank you. Are you going to tell me the rest?" "Yes. The person who has been helping the federal government build a case against me for the last 2 years is Regina. You have been her runner. You did not know you were her runner because she framed it for you as tasks for me that were not technically tasks for me, and because you trusted her, and because you are young and she is very good at what she does. On Saturday night, you went into this house at her instruction and you photographed a notebook in my desk drawer. The notebook was theater. I put it there 6 weeks ago as bait. When you photographed it, a colleague of Regina's realized the notebook was bait, and she texted you to abort. You received the text at the auction. The waitress at the auction, who was refilling your coffee, saw the text on your phone. The waitress at the auction is the same person sitting at this table to your left. Marco turned his head. He looked at Scarlett. Scarlett looked back. "Hi," Scarlett said. "Hi," Marco said after a long second. Marco. "Yeah, Uncle Leo. I'm not going to hurt you. Nobody in this organization is going to hurt you. You are going to finish your pie. You are going to go home. You are going to sleep if you can sleep. Tomorrow morning at 9, a lawyer named Mrs. Farber is going to call you. She is the best criminal defense attorney in the state. She has been my lawyer for 14 years. You are going to tell her everything you have ever done on Regina's instruction, including things you did not at the time understand were anything at all. You are going to leave nothing out. Mrs. Farber is going to help you understand which of those things were crimes and which were not. She is going to prepare you to give a truthful statement to the federal prosecutor under an agreement of immunity which I will arrange for you before the statement is given. You are going to give that statement. You are going to tell the truth in it. You are not going to lie to protect Regina, and you are not going to lie to protect me. You are going to be, for one morning in your life, a man who does not perform. That is the deal. In return, you do not go to prison, and your mother does not bury her son. Are you listening to me? I am listening to you. Say back to me what I just told you. Marco said it back. He said it in the flat, stunned voice of a man repeating the terms of the rest of his life. When he got to the end, he stopped. Then he said, very quietly, Uncle Leo. Yes. Are you going to prison? A short sentence. A year, maybe a little less. I will be all right. Because of me. Because of me. Because of 1,000 small decisions I made over 22 years. Not because of you. You are not to carry this. Do you hear me, Marco? You are not to carry this. I forbid it. Marco put his hands flat on the table. Then he put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook once, hard, and did not shake again, and when he took his hands away, his face was dry, but different. He was not crying. He was, Scarlett thought, doing the thing his uncle had just described. He was being, for one evening in his life, a man who did not perform. Okay, Marco said. Okay, Uncle Leo. Okay. They finished the pie. Nobody spoke much. When Marco left, Leonardo walked him to the door and held him for a long time at the doorway, the way men in old neighborhoods held the sons of their dead brothers, and Scarlett did not watch that. She sat at the kitchen table looking at the folded piece of paper under her hand, and she did not watch. When Leonardo came back, he sat down across from her, and they were quiet for a long time. Scarlett? Yes. Thank you. For what? For not letting me hate him. You were not going to hate him. You love him too much. Yes, but I would have made myself. You stopped me from making myself. The next morning, Regina Halliday's apartment door opened at 7:12 to find Leonardo Crane standing in the hallway in a charcoal suit and a white shirt with the collar open one button, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Vince was at the end of the hall by the stairwell, out of sight. Dom was in the lobby. Regina looked at Leonardo for one long second. Then she stepped aside and let him in. What was said between them at her kitchen table was never reported by either of them to anyone. Dom waited in the lobby for 51 minutes. Then Regina came down alone. She was wearing a blue coat and she was carrying a small leather bag, and she got into a taxi and she rode to the Federal Building on 7th Street. And she went upstairs and she filed her case. In the case, as filed, Leonardo Crane turned himself in voluntarily through counsel the same morning and pled to a narrow set of charges relating to untaxed cigarettes and unpermitted shipping activity during a 3-year window, which under the federal guidelines carried a sentence of 11 months. Marco Venturi received immunity in exchange for a statement. The 7 names on the folded piece of paper became, over the next 18 months, 7 federal indictments in 2 states. The agent Regina had been meeting with at the coffee shop in Old Creighton became, over those same 18 months, the youngest supervisory special agent in her regional office. Regina herself testified in 4 of the 7 fentanyl cases. She mentioned her brother by name from the witness stand in the 3rd one. It was the only time in her federal career that she was reported to have cried in a courtroom. Leonardo Crane served 8 months. He came out looking thinner and older and lighter, the way men sometimes come out of short sentences when they have gone in ready to be done with a life. His sister picked him up at the bus station. Marco did not come. Marco had moved to Denver, quietly, with his mother's blessing, and was, the last Scarlett heard, taking the Colorado bar. The Blue Gull closed in the spring of the next year because Manny's knee finally gave out, and he sold the building to a developer who put up a coffee chain in its place. Scarlett did not work for the coffee chain. She did not need to. A small trust had been set up in her name during the long months of Leonardo's case, funded from a holding account nobody could trace, and the trust paid her mother's memory care bill every month the way it had been paying it since that first Thursday in October. And it also paid Scarlett a modest monthly stipend, not enough to be lavish, enough to let her breathe. She used the breathing room to go back to school. She enrolled in a 2-year criminal justice program at the community college downtown. She wanted, she told the intake counselor, to maybe work in witness protection. The counselor asked her why. Scarlett said she had a feeling for what people were willing to give up to be invisible, and a feeling also for when invisibility stopped being the thing that saved them and started being the thing that cost them. The counselor wrote this down. A year after Leonardo came home, on a cold Tuesday afternoon in March, Scarlett was working a shift at a small family place down on Harborside. She had picked up waitressing again 2 nights a week because she missed it, because she was good at it, because she had learned that the work of watching a room full of people eat was one of the truest kinds of work there was. And the bell over the door jingled, and Leonardo Crane walked in. He was alone. He had on a wool overcoat, and he was carrying a folded newspaper, and he looked like a man who had come in out of the cold because he was cold. He did not see her at first. He took a booth by the window. She walked over with the coffee pot. "Coffee, sir?" He looked up. His slate eyes did a small, slow thing. "Miss Vale." "Leonardo." "You are working 2 nights a week." "I like it." "I did not know this was your place." "I didn't tell you. How did you end up here?" "I walked. I've been walking in the afternoon since I came home. I walk until I'm cold and then I find somewhere to drink coffee. I did not pick this place on purpose." "Cream." "Please." She poured his coffee. She brought him cream. She brought him a menu, although he did not need one, and he ordered the soup because it was Tuesday. And Tuesdays at this place the soup was minestrone. And when it came he ate it slowly, and she worked her other tables, and the old man at table 4 needed his coffee refilled, and the young mother at table 6 needed more crackers for her toddler. And the ordinary work of the ordinary afternoon went on around him, the way ordinary work went on around everyone. When he was done, he put money on the table, a 20 for an $8 bowl of soup, because some men did not change. And he put on his coat, and on his way out he stopped at the counter where she was refilling a sugar caddy. "Miss Vale." "Yes." "Are you all right?" "I am all right." "Your mother." "She still knows my name most days. That is more than I had any right to hope for." "Good." "Leonardo." "Yes." "Are you all right?" He thought about it. That was the thing about him, she realized, watching him think about it. He had always thought about her questions before he answered them. It was the small courtesy that had, over time, turned into the thing she had trusted. "I'm all right," he said finally. "I am not the same. But I am all right. I walk. I read. I see my sister on Sundays. Marco calls me on Wednesdays. He is dating a woman in Denver who is a public defender, which I find extremely funny and extremely correct." "That is extremely funny." "Yes." He looked at her for a long moment. The diner was warm. The bell over the door jingled as someone else came in. The coffee pot hissed behind her on its burner. "Scarlett?" "Yes. A year ago you asked me, in my kitchen, why I was thanking you. I answered you. I want to tell you now why I was really thanking you. I am not sure I knew, that night. I have figured it out since." "Okay." "You were the first person in 22 years who looked at me and saw a man who could still choose. Everybody else who had ever worked with me or against me had decided, a long time before they met me, that I was finished. I was a shape. I was a role. I was the thing in the newspaper. You walked up to my table with a bottle of wine, and you whispered in my ear, and in that moment you were deciding something about me that nobody had let me decide about myself in a very long time. You were deciding that I was still a man who could be warned, that I was still a man who could be told, that I was still a man who might do something other than the next obvious thing. I did not understand at the time that that was what you were giving me. I understand it now. It is the largest thing anyone has ever given me. I wanted to say so out loud before too much more time passed." Scarlett set down the sugar caddy. Her hands, as they had a habit of doing around this man, were steady. "Leonardo." "Yes." "You're welcome." "Thank you." "Go home, it's cold." "I am going home." He nodded at her, one small, slow nod. He walked to the door. At the door he turned back and their eyes met across the warm room, and it was the same nod he had given her a year ago at the Blue Gull, and also not the same nod at all, and Scarlett understood in that moment something she had been circling for a year without naming, which was that a life was not a straight line from the kind of person you were born as to the kind of person you ended up as. A life was a series of small rooms, And in each room, there was a moment where you decided whether to walk out the back or pick up the wine bottle. And nobody ever told you it was that moment until after it was over. And the only way to recognize it in time was to have learned, somewhere along the way, to look under tables. She had not been born the kind of woman who looked under tables. Her father had taught her. Her father had taught her without meaning to, across 19 years of Wednesdays at a blue gold counter that she had not even known he had spent there. And she had not understood what he had taught her until a dime-sized disc under a pedestal on a rainy October night had asked her, without words, whether she was going to use it. And she had used it, and she had not walked out the back. The bell over the door jingled as Leonardo stepped out into the cold. The afternoon light was silver on the harbor. A gull cried somewhere down near the piers. Scarlet Vale, 27 years old, with a chipped front tooth and a scar under her chin, and a name tag that said Scarlet in clean printed letters now, picked up her coffee pot and went back to her tables. And Bert from the old Blue Gull, who had followed her to the new place out of loyalty, waved his empty cup at her from table 4, and she smiled at him the way she smiled at him every day, and she thought, there are worse lives. There are a great many worse lives than this one. And she meant it. And that, in the end, was the thing she had learned that nobody had ever told her to expect, that courage was not the loud, brave choice in the loud, brave moment. Courage was the quiet decision, in an ordinary room on an ordinary night, that the sneak was not going to win this one. Not on her watch. Not while she was the one holding the wine.